Hey, welcome back, options traders. Well, one of the traders in our group wrote in with a really good question. What is a stale red or green light? Now, these are terms used by chartists or technicians, people that read charts, and we'll take a look at what these mean. But more importantly, I want to show why you have to be careful about the interpretation that so many of them assign with these stale lights. So let's go find out what these are all about. As always, before we do, please be sure to click like and subscribe. It goes a long way into promoting the channel and is greatly appreciated. So let's start off with stale lights. This term in general is one that I think most of you are familiar with from driving. That's where it comes from. So let's say you're driving down the road, you turn the corner, and your next light is a block away and it's green. Well, you should anticipate that it's going to be red because you don't know how long it's been green. And if you continue on through as if it's going to be green and you're accelerating, you might end up going through a yellow or worse yet, a red light. So it's more of a risk management technique to say, look, we don't know how long this light's been green, so let's approach it cautiously. In other words, we're anticipating that it's going to turn. And that's really where this whole idea of stale lights comes in. So in the markets, for similar reasons, technicians talk about red and green candles in terms of being stale red or green lights. So for example, I'm just going to use stale green lights as an example. What that means is that you have seen several consecutive green candles, day after day or week after week. Now, there is no specific number, so it's not like after you've seen 6 that it's a stale green light. It's just that you've seen several. And that's part of what makes it difficult to interpret. So, for example, let's say that yesterday's candle was green, today's candle is this red one, and then we go on this nice streak of 6 green candles. Most traders would call this a stale green light. In other words, they're anticipating that red is due. However, remember we've talked about this with streaks recently. Just because you may see 6 green candles in a row doesn't mean you should go out and start selling, for example, naked calls with 3 days to expiration, expecting that it's got to turn. That is simply not true. And the reason is long streaks happen. I talked about this in a recent video. Back in 1913, a Monte Carlo casino roulette wheel spun 26 black numbers in a row. Now that's on the order of about 1 in 274 million for that to happen. So if you were to sit down at a roulette wheel and taking a bet that the next 26 spins will be black is a horrifically bad bet. But notice where you're starting the counting point from right now. So on the other hand, believing that it can't happen over time is an equally bad idea. See, the whole thing about streaks depends on time. So over 1 month, 8 green candles in a row would be unlikely. Over 1 year, it's expected. But as I just mentioned, where do you start counting? So you might say, wow, we just got 8 green candles in a row. Well, did you just sit down with your friend and say, I'll bet the next 8 candles are going to be green? That would be unlikely. But if you're looking at a candlestick chart, how long has that been going on? Probably for years. So again, where do you start counting? So remember, look at the way the math works out. So for example, if we take 2 to the 6, that's just 2 times 2 times 2, and so on for 6 times, that comes up to 64. So the reason we're taking 2 raised to the 6 is we're looking at red or green. And so in other words, if you were looking at 64 candles in a row, you would expect about 6 of them to be of the same color, whether red or green. You should expect a streak of 6 in that 64 candle period. If we look at 2 to the 7th, we would expect every 128 candles to see a streak of 7. For 256 trading days, you should expect a streak of 8. Over 512 trading days, a streak of 9, and over 1,024 candles, that's about 4 years, you should expect a streak of 10. So I know it can really kind of mess with your intuitions. You're saying there's just no way you should ever see a streak of 10 candles in a row or 10 heads in a row with a coin flip. And that's simply not understanding the probabilities. Yes, it's odd if you want to start counting right now and say, I'll bet we're going to see 10 heads in a row. But if you're going to flip for 1,024 times, not only is it not odd, it's what you should expect. So let's go back to an Excel spreadsheet that we've used before for similar reasons, but see how it applies to stale green and red lights. Okay, so we're back into an Excel spreadsheet. Now again, we've seen this in a recent video, but I went back and looked at the S&P 500 and just downloaded this from finance.yahoo.com. And you can see there's 7,767 rows. And so that's going back from January of 1993. And then what I've done is I've programmed this to calculate if this would have been a red or a green candle. It's just seeing if the closing price is above the open, it's green. If it's below, it's red. And then this column over here just counts the streaks. So right there we got a streak of 4 greens and so on. Here's a streak of 4 reds. And so if we go back for all 7,767 days, mathematically you should expect about 13 red or 13 green candles. And we got exactly 13. And with 250 trading days, you should expect about 8. We got 7. And in that same video, I showed that if you were to look back for 126 years, you should expect 14. So in that video, I showed that back in 1897, we got 14 green candles on the Dow, and then we got 13 in 2023. Exactly 126 years later, just what you would expect. So once again, it would be easy to look at that and say, well, I just got into this trade and now we got 6 green candles in a row, and yet there's another 7 coming. And the misperception is that you're starting your count from the day that you got into the trade, not recognizing that the market doesn't know where it started. You're going back even far longer than 1993. So no, it shouldn't be a shock that you get 13 in a row or 10 in a row. So here you can see that this occurred on row 7103. So if we come down to 7103, where is it? Right there. There is the streak of green candles, 13. So if you just entered a trade on this date, March of 2021, and suddenly you went on this streak and you thought, wow, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, it's got to turn red. This would be highly unlikely in a given month. Well, again, where do you want to start the count from? The chart doesn't know that this is where you're starting the count from. That's where you started to count. It's just an arbitrary point. The candles have been going on and on and on for a long, long time. And so just because you might see 4 or 5 or 6 doesn't mean you can't get another and another and another and another all the way down. They will happen. So I hope that helps you to understand what a stale red or green light is. It's just referring to long streaks of red or green candles. But what you have to be particularly careful of is the interpretation. Just because you may have entered a trade today and shortly after see 6 greens in a row doesn't mean that the odds are heavily in your favor that the market's about to turn. That's a bad decision, and it's not the way to get good results from your trades. And for anyone who'd like to learn more about the art and science of options trading, please check out the Alpha Trader course, Strategy Lab, and a candlesticks and technical analysis course. It's all at optionsatoz.com. Also, please join us on Options A to Z's Facebook trading group, and you can find a link in the description below.